when you make a mistake with one person, it's very easy to go and apologize and say that, hey, listen, I made a mistake. It was unintended. And here is how I think I want to rectify it. So the apology always works well when you stop defending it. I think one of the first things that, when you see in this particular case, if a leader makes a statement which goes viral, it's all over the memes, and obviously a lot of people are talking about it. So obviously the person has touched on something where there is huge amount of sensitivity. And then, the most insensitive thing is for the senior leaders to actually turn back and say, I have actually worked with this person. He's a fantastic person. That just looks like sucking up. So that's a terrible way to do it. It just reinforces and gives extra life to the meat.
We have new media houses around HR. We have publications coming in. We do see, a lot of things written about workplace issues, toxic work culture, and all of it. Do they serve any purpose? Does it get any meaningful change to the companies or in employees' life?
What I wish they could have done better is to actually start putting a lot more focus on putting the voice of the employee. Right now, it's a little more skewed towards the voice of the employer. You will see a lot of interviews with the CEO, with the CHROs, CFO, etc., all of that. But you don't really see enough coverage of people who are the next generation. So, people who are not necessarily in the C-suite, but, in the middle levels or at the entry levels. We don't ever get to read what the management trainees feel or people who've just started working for about a year or two. We don't really see a lot of that getting covered. There are, of course, companies which are highlighting the talents of people who are under 30, etc., all of that. But that's done more from the point of view of a little more gimmicky stuff like 40 under 40, 30 under 30 kind of things. I'm not necessarily saying that those are great coverages, but I think it's more important when you talk about a workplace view. Yes, you should talk about what the CEO feels, what the CHRO feels, what the CFO feels. But you should also talk about what the managers feel. Practically, if you go down that pyramid, the org pyramid, you practically see nothing at the bottom of the pyramid, almost till the mid-level. So that is a potential opportunity.
Yet another episode of Indian Media with Experts. Today we have HR in the spotlight, and we are going to discuss employer branding and HR media coverage in India. Joining us is a very special guest here to share his insights on this very timely and relevant topic, Mr. Abhijit Bhadri. Mr. Bhadri needs no introduction. However, I'll try sharing a glimpse into his illustrious journey. He is a talent management advisor to top firms, a sought-after coach and mentor for leaders at all stages of their careers, and a LinkedIn top voice. Mr. Bhadri headed learning and development globally at Microsoft and has worked with Fortune 100 companies, startups, and large Indian organizations. That is not all. He is the author of best-selling books like The Digital Tsunami and Don't Hire the Best, with his latest work, Career 3.0, making waves across the talent management landscape. His contributions to the profession span Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and more. Honestly, the list goes on. Welcome to the show, Mr. Bhadri. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
Can I please request you to call me Abhijit?
I can't call you Abhijit. Let's have you. See, no one calls you Mr. Bhadri, so we have to call you Mr. Bhadri. That's a new name that we can give you.
Hey, Prabhu, please call me Abhijit. Much easier. Yes, sir, or
No,
Mr.
I'm so used to calling you this that I can't call you Abhijit. Let's go with Mr. Bhadri. It's a good way to address you. I think you
Fair
deserve
enough.
Mr. Bhadri. I'll start by asking you with, over 3 decades of experience in the HR industry, having witnessed its evolution, and you've been a key part of it as well. How do you view the Indian media's approach to covering HR and workplace issues? What's your take on it, especially, in present times?
I think along with the way HR has evolved, it is always a combination of the way work changes, the way the skills required to do the work changes, and the marketplace for the skills, which is the employer. So that has evolved over the years, which means that we now have a lot more people, let's say, who are into gig work. We have people who are, doing part-time work, freelance, consultants. I mean, so we have seen far more nuanced versions of this. One of the things that happens is as something becomes, it grows, you also have the ability to start creating specializations. So you now have talent management, you have compensation and benefits as a separate piece, or learning and development as a subcomponent. When you begin to see specializations, that's a sign that it is now maturing. But when it comes to the coverage of HR, it's I think still lagging behind a little, and that happens because we have not really started learning about HR from the media. It always used to be HR was something that you only sort of learned because you got into a institute and did a specialization in that. But today, the whole notion of learning has become far more democratized. So we also learn about different terms, different disciplines. I learn about AI not from an institute, but from what I read and what I watch on YouTube or through television, etc. So this evolution, as it happens, then you begin to see better reporting. And that I think is where reporting on HR is all about.
Yeah, but what is this trend? We have new media houses around HR. We have publications coming in. We do see, a lot of things written about workplace issues, toxic work culture, and all of it. When you say lagging, what is it that is lagging? Do they serve any purpose? Does it get any meaningful change to the companies or in employees' life? How is it helping, if at all? And if it is not, then what should change?
No, I think it definitely does help. And the reason for that is if you look at all the prevention of sexual harassment cases that have now been highlighted, have driven greater awareness. So people have started putting, training programs to train the managers, train the employees about their rights and all of that. That's one area where I think there's been most sort of significant contribution of media has been in that. So, that's a fantastic thing to have happened. In the same way, when, there's new legislation that comes up about working conditions, about, what can be done or what cannot be done, what is legal, what is illegal, all of that as it has evolved, the labor code, media has played a very powerful part in actually highlighting some of those things. And what I wish they could have done better is to actually start putting a lot more focus on putting the voice of the employee. Right now, it's a little more skewed towards the voice of the employer. So, you will see a lot of interviews with the CEO, with the CHROs, CFO, etc., all of that. But you don't really see enough coverage of people who are the next generation. So, people who are not necessarily in the C-suite, but, in the middle levels or at the entry levels. We don't ever get to read what the management trainees feel or people who've just started working for about a year or two. We don't really see a lot of that getting covered. So I think that's an opportunity to put more of the voices. If you see the media coverage, so really, the more influential person, if they say one line, it gets picked up by everybody. But, there are lots of people who are very bright people. There are, of course, companies which are talking about, highlighting the talents of people who are under 30, etc., all of that. But that's done more from the point of view of a little more gimmicky stuff like 40 under 40, 30 under 30 kind of things. I'm not necessarily saying that those are great coverages, but I think it's more important when you talk about a workplace view. Yes, you should talk about what the CEO feels, what the CHRO feels, what the CFO feels. But you should also talk about what the managers feel. You should also talk about what the employees feel. You should talk about what the workmen feel. Practically, if you go down that pyramid, the org pyramid, you practically see nothing at the bottom of the pyramid, almost till the mid level. So
True,
that
true.
is a potential opportunity.
So that would have been my next question, and you very relevant there. All we hear is from the CEO or the CHRO, and surprisingly, or we always hear good things about the company from them, be it DI initiatives or workplace culture. Of course, it does look PR-ish. Do you think that Indian media, while covering HR, can balance it out? Of course, the media houses do have their business goals. How do you think a journalist, while reporting on HR issues or workplace issues, can create a balance? Yeah, your take on that.
I think when you get the voices of people lower down the pyramid, you will
Yeah.
automatically create credibility. I think this whole piece that happens is as people move further up the org chart, their stake becomes higher. It's pretty, unlikely that a CEO is going to say, we have 3, 4 problems in our
Yeah.
company, because he has got limitations on what he or she can say, because that impacts the share price, that impacts the board perception, that impacts the employer branding. So the impact is very, very high. Therefore, they are sort of in some sense, I also kind of in some sense feel that they get limited because then they have to really talk about what is really fantastic about the company and what's great. And that creates, ironically, a bit of a credibility gap. But if you include a lot of people, I would actually say, if you flip the pyramid and say all the things which are great about the company, if the more junior people would say, if the workmen would say, that would have tremendous authenticity and credibility. And I think that would work wonders. It would have far more impact than any PR campaign that you can do. But on the other hand, if the CEO also does put a slightly more balanced view, and the PR firms can help them frame it in a more positive light. But if they talk about, here are the opportunities that we are working on, that creates a lot more credibility, because it's really like saying, if I tell you that I have no flaws, I mean, you are immediately going to smirk in your head and say, ah, sure.
Yeah.
But that's also the same thing that happens with organizations. The stuff that you put out in PR, it's a bit like a matrimonial ad. And so if you say this person has zero flaws, the more you discover later, the more unhappy the partner is going to be, or the stakeholders are going to be. So I think it's really around that.
Yeah, absolutely right. I remember once talking to a leader, and he goes on to say that, instead of companies getting certifications that they are good places to work, if somebody really has to join a company, you should actually go on to ask an ex-employee, or, an employee working there. So you rightly said that, the credibility itself would be generated when, you have those, employees talking about the company instead of the CEO blowing his own trumpet. Yes, very valid point there. When we talk about this entire sensational reporting, so now, the entire thing is being hijacked by these, recently we saw this 90-hour work debate, and, all of it, it keeps going on and on for weeks. Do you think that it dilutes the entire conversation around HR and workplace issues? You'll have memes around it. You will have, an agenda that is going against the leader who must have spoken. And how do I put it? What do you think? How should the media balance this as well? Do you think they cross the line somewhere?
No, I think, news, you cannot control the way the news appears. So it's a bit like, we are used to looking at news being consumed pretty much like, the water in a glass. It's always going to stay like this. It's not going to change. The shape will always be like this. So it's more predictable. But if you think about, when these kind of memes and sensational pieces appear, it's a bit like the media today, social media, because every person who's around, from the employees to the non-employees to the shareholders to the average person reading the stuff, everybody has an opinion, and they can put their opinion, because that's what social media has done. Therefore, sometimes it does get a little out of hand, and you see repetitions of this. You see it on the billboards, you see it on the social media, on the videos, and all of that. The same questions being asked on television, and the newspapers doing it. I also think that sometimes it's a way to sort of warn the other people what the people are thinking about. So I think there are two great ways in which leaders can learn about what the average person is thinking. Because, in a very hierarchical society of any kind, and organizations are hierarchical, even if they say, oh, we are very non-hierarchical, etc. I mean, organizations need to have a certain amount of hierarchy to be able to function. But what that also does is, if the leader is not extremely skilled in having the people speak freely, then what really happens is that you have a scenario where the people don't really share their point of view in public. They step out and share it anonymously on social media, or they ask their friends to talk about it.
Yes.
So one of the ways to understand what people are really talking about is to either watch stand-up comedy. I mean, because comedians or writers and people who write fiction, they very often are the people who can see the future. They can actually, and if you sort of go back and see, historically also, we've really talked about, the insensitivity when people make these kind of statements. Chances are that these people have people to support them at home on, if there is somebody to be taken care of, a young kid or an aging parent, or, people have to, run their own lives outside of work. So when somebody says, I like to have you working for a certain number of hours more than what is required, what they are paying for, then it's important that they begin to understand, if not from the employees, who may sometimes have no say in the matter, the world outside sobers them down. So I think it's a free democracy thrives on media. So you do need the stand-up comedians to actually sometimes poke fun at the pompous leader, who otherwise is completely immune to getting feedback. So I think it's necessary. Yes, there is a little bit of a blow up on this, but so what?
Yeah. So, when you have cases like these, and, a leader saying something so responsible as like a 90-hour week, or why would you want to stare at your wife, something like that, what role does a company or the leader himself or the HR leaders have to play to manage that situation, or we call it the crisis communication? And do you think it is a good idea to accept that they made a mistake, or you keep firefighting it again and again, different ways? What's your take on that?
The first caveat I'm going to say is I'm no media expert, so therefore mine is, what an average person would come and talk about. I would sort of say that I think, when you make a mistake, it's the same thing today. When you make a mistake with one person, it's very easy to go and apologize and say that, hey, listen, I made a mistake. It was unintended. And here is how I think I want to rectify it. So the apology always works well when you stop defending it. I think one of the first things that, when you see in this particular case, if a leader makes a statement which goes viral, it's all over the memes, and obviously a lot of people are talking about it. So obviously the person has touched on something where there is huge amount of sensitivity. And then, the most insensitive thing is for the senior leaders to actually turn back and say, I have actually worked with this person. He's a fantastic person. That just looks like sucking up. So that's a terrible way to do it. It just reinforces and gives extra life to the meat. Now the second rung begins to become a part of the target. And then they sort of say, oh, okay, then maybe they're making fun of the senior leaders. Let's ask some of the junior people. Then they are told that, okay, you have to go and put this saying that I worked with this person. I think he's a wonderful person. The easiest thing would have been to say, hey, it was something which was insensitive. I'm sorry about it, and move on. The internet is very quick to forgive you when you apologize, and a genuine apology, and there are many examples of this when people have come out and say, I didn't realize that it came across in such a manner, and I'm very ashamed of what I said. And that's it. And the people actually forget about it. Because if you tell me something that I already am saying that I am, if you tell me that I'm insensitive, you'll keep telling me until I say, yeah, I agree, it was an insensitive thing to say. So the easiest way to address this issue is to actually acknowledge it and sort of say that I will make amends, and then live by that. It's a bit like when you ask, your employees for feedback about the company, and they're telling you this is not working, this is not working, we would rather have this.
Yeah.
And then you kind of say, yeah, that must be 5 disgruntled people. Instead of that, why don't you take that as a feedback? It's not a happy scenario to be told that here are 5 things that are not working well. All of us always like to hear good things, but it takes real leadership is about how you react to when you hear the not so good things.
Very important point, and it's a free tip for all leaders. I totally agree with what you say, that the easiest thing to firefight any of such situation is to just apologize. Besides media, what are those top 2 workplace issues or HR issues that you think need attention? We'll have your view on that, and we'll end the call.
I would, love to actually talk about, different aspects of talent management and HR, etc. Some of those things, and if there is an opportunity, I'd love to come back and talk about some of those. But thank you very much. I mean, despite my being no expert on media, I'm grateful that you asked me. Thank you.
These are extremely relevant things, and these are tips for free for all leaders that might be listening to this conversation. Absolute pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for coming to our show.